Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "I seek God, I seek God." As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. "Has he got lost?" asked one. "Did he lose his way like a child?" asked another. "Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, emigrated?" Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers." But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche was born in 1844. His father was a Lutheran pastor, a fact that helps explain how this ardent anti-Christian nevertheless held a particular fondness for Luther's translation of the Bible, which he regarded as, quote, "the masterpiece of German prose and the greatest German book so far." Both his father and only brother died while he was very young, and he spent his life under the care of his mother and sister. This feminine upbringing is negative reflected in his ambivalent relation to women, which often swings from the romantic to the virulently misogynistic over the course of only a couple of lines. This theme of ambivalence and tension is a recurring theme in Nietzsche's writing. He loathes Judaism, yet writes scathingly of anti-Semites. "I will have all anti-Semites shot," he says in one letter. He hates Christianity, but has a deep respect for Jesus. There was only one Christian, he insists, and he died on the cross. Nietzsche is, simply put, impossible to pigeonhole. As a youth, he was a mostly average student, but one who received a top-level education thanks to a scholarship to a prestigious academy, likely given in response to his father's death. Even at a young age, he showed a disposition towards the poetry of Hölderlin, the operas of Wagner, and Christian theology. He began study in theology and philology at the University of Bonn in 1864, but quickly dropped theology as he abruptly lost his faith. Following a brief military stint, he became a professor at the University of Basel at only 24 years old. But despite this early success, he shortly resigned from the position due to bad health, which would plague him for the rest of his life. During this next decade of ill health, he traveled throughout Europe, spending time in a variety of climates, from the humidity of the Mediterranean to the arid Swiss Alps, in a futile task of finding a climate that was conducive to his health. But despite these health troubles, this period was also his most prolific. Living as an independent author, he produced a remarkable output of texts with such fantastical names as Human, All Too Human, The Gay Science, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Ecce Homo, among others. In 1889, he would experience a severe mental breakdown from which he would never recover, spending a decade drifting in and out of lucidity before dying in August of 1900. Nietzsche's work is exciting, unpredictable, enchanting, incendiary, at times hysterically funny, and almost always provocative. He tends to write in short passages, writing entire books of aphorisms, and these aphorisms are designed to shock us out of our complacency. While a comprehensive rundown of his major themes is well beyond the scope of this brief introduction, what can be said is that the basic project of Nietzsche was what he called the revaluation of all values. According to Nietzsche, the success of Christianity marked the introduction of a form of nihilism, a rejection of life as manifest in the instincts and the body and the will, and the replacement of the love of strength with a life-denying, world-denying, and body-denying love of weakness, what he names pity. While this pity views itself as an ethical care for the marginalized, on Nietzsche's account, it is merely the resentment-fueled revenge of the weak against the strong. Christianity's pity, he argues, is really just a cover for its envy. Without access to power, money, sex, success, the early Christians simply declared those things evil. But this transformation of value from the strong to the weak was not immediate. And it is ultimately only with the birth of Enlightenment modernity, he argues, that this project reached its fulfillment. This fulfillment is captured in the paradoxical statement, the death of God, the rallying cry of the 1960s death of God theologians, and the continuing touchstone for contemporary radical theology. For Nietzsche, the inevitable result of Christianity's nihilism, its rejection of life, was that it birthed a world in which God itself would no longer hold any meaning. We don't need the moral God for rationality grounds or ethics. We don't need the divine right of kings because people rule themselves through democracy. We don't need the God of nature because science tells us everything we need to know about our world. God is dead, Nietzsche proclaims, and we have killed him. This is not, contrary to the way it's often portrayed, a triumphant cry of the victorious atheist. Indeed, Nietzsche is, if anything, more critical of his contemporary atheists who fail to recognize the significance of their own religious disbelief, who mistake God as just one more idea among many, which can be rejected as easily as any other. And thus, insofar as they cling to good bourgeois ethics and social mores, they seek to bandage over this infinite wound. I am afraid, Nietzsche writes, that we are not yet rid of God because we still have faith in grammar. But Nietzsche knows better. If God is dead, then the very foundation of our ethical, social, cultural, and political world has been unmoored, and we are all set adrift on a dark ocean of unknowing. And so rather than an arrogant cry, Nietzsche's declaration of the death of God is a softer, almost mournful lament of one who is smart enough to know that the gap left by the divine will be filled one way or another. We always worship something, but where will our worship now turn? What will become our highest value? Money and capitalism? The white race and blood purity? Fame and popularity? Or something entirely new? For Nietzsche, it remains to be seen. Nietzsche therefore tasked himself with answering this question, what comes next? This is why he'll often describe both himself and his philosophy as untimely. He aims to anticipate a world that has not yet arrived, pointing to a new set of values which reject the pitying attitude of Christianity, but also recognize that a return to the heroic cult of strength found in Homer's Iliad, for example, is not possible. There is no unwinding the clock to a pre-Christian era. We must move forward. The world is a becoming, a constant flowing change. You can't, as one of Nietzsche's favorite philosophers, Heraclitus, suggests, step into the same river twice. So Nietzsche begins to imagine what a new value set might look like, one built on life, vitality, the body, instinct, friendship, and gift giving. He names the figures who populate this new value system Übermensch. Not supermen, as it's often badly translated, but over men. These are the people who not only overcome their nihilistic society, but overcome themselves. This is a philosophy of self-overcoming, whereby we transfigure ourselves into a new kind of being. These new beings are those who pass over Christianity and its secularized Western offspring and who create a new system of values, who build a new world. For Nietzsche, therefore, the real question is, are we brave enough to undertake this task of self overcoming. So how shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last, he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke into pieces and went out. "I have come too early," he said to them. "My time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." It has been related further that on the same day, the madman forced his way into several churches, and there struck up his Requiem Aeternam Deo. Led out and called to account, he is said always to have replied nothing but, "What, after all, are these churches now, if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God?"